Hello, my name's Doug Quinn and I'm the Principal Moderator for 9DR01, Component 1, Devising, A-Level Drama and Theatre, Pearson EdXL. This video support presentation is for centres approaching Component 1 Devising with a range of tips and social distance strategies ahead of teaching this first component. This support session is being recorded on the 16th of June 2020. As it currently stands, we are still awaiting confirmation from the DFE and Ofqual with regards to any changes that might be made to the requirements of the qualification. When information is released by them, Pearson will be in touch with centres to provide further guidance. With this in mind, the information that I'm going to give you today is based on the assumption that the requirements for the assessment of Component 1 will basically remain the same. We will share with you any new developments as they come to light, and further guidance is available on all EdXL websites, including social media platforms such as Twitter and the Performing Arts subject page. There is also a Facebook group where lots of information is shared by Paul Webster and his team at Performing Arts. So let's start this presentation. EdXL A-Level Drama and Theatre, Component 1 Devising, top tips for devising at a distance. The aims and objectives of this session is to provide and consider practical ways of devising and delivering A-Level Component 1 in light of social distancing requirements. I thought I would also use this opportunity to recap the demands of the assessment criteria and possibly address some common issues and frequently asked questions that have already come through to Paul Webster and his team. So, a quick specification recap. There are three main areas of focus for Component 1: interpreting, creating and developing a devised piece from one key extract and applying the methods of one practitioner. A group performance or design realization of the devised piece, and then analysis and evaluation of the creative process and the final product, which takes place through the form of the portfolio, something that we'll talk about throughout this presentation. The assessment objectives for 9DR01 Devising are A01, A02 and A04. And a quick recap of those assessment objectives are: A01 has two parts: creating and developing ideas to communicate meaning, and making connections between dramatic theory and practice. A02 is the application of theatrical skill, whether that's through the acting route or through the design route. And A04 is analysis and evaluation of candidates' own work and the work of others. The assessment focus for Component 1 is divided into two parts: a portfolio, which is made up of 60 marks, 40 marks assessing A01 and 20 marks assessing A04. The devised performance or the design realization is worth 20 marks and that assesses A02. The component is worth up to 80 marks in total, which is 40% of the whole qualification. This component is called Devising and involves students in a challenging creative process, full details of which can be found in the specification. The breakdown of marks should be noted. This year in particular, I think this is hugely important. 60 marks for the portfolio, 20 marks for the performance or the design. So it's important to get the balance right in terms of compiling the portfolio in relation to preparing the performance or design. Choice of text and one key extract. There remains a free choice of text for this component, but there are rules concerning this free choice. The one key extract is defined in the specification as a scene or moment that is significant to the text as a whole, and it should be at least 10 minutes in length when performed. There also remains a free choice of practitioner for this component, but you should consider the definition of practitioner in the specification. The choice of practitioner must not be the same as the one chosen in Component 3. So if students are going to look at Brecht in their devised work, they cannot choose Brecht to look at Component 3. Practitioners from the Component 3 list can be used for Component 1 as long as they are different to the ones chosen for the written exam. Group sizes, this will all be very familiar to you, but I've put some stuff in colour here just to highlight some of the differences that we're acknowledging in this series. Groups must be between 3 and 6 performance students, and there can be up to 1 designer per role per group. All students will be assessed as individuals. In light of social distancing, there is no requirement this year to use a non-assessed individual. For example, if you're in a centre where you only have one candidate, that candidate can devise and perform a piece that meets the minimum regulatory requirement minutes of 6 minutes without using any other non-assessed individuals. Another example is that you only have 2 performers in your centre. This will be acceptable for the 2021 series. There is no need in this year to add extra non-assessed individuals to make up the minimum group size of 3. Any of the above circumstances, permission must be sought from drama assessment before proceeding. And what I would advise doing is when you get a reply from drama assessment, print off that email and put it in the pack that goes off to your moderator when you send your work off to be sampled. Time limits. There is a regulatory requirement that groups must complete a minimum performance time of 6 minutes for this component. However, in the latest edition of the specification, which is on the Edexcel website, it's updated as issue 4, there's a new section that states meeting the performance timings. Please have a look at that. There is no longer a requirement to award 0 marks for performances that fall under the minimum time requirement. The information has been amended to read students, performance and design, who do not meet the regulatory minimum performance requirements of 6 minutes will be assessed by teachers against the assessment criteria on pages 26, 28, 30 and 31. However, students will not be able to achieve beyond level 2. So if you don't meet the regulatory minimum time requirement, you cannot award marks beyond level 2. And then there's some quick information here on time limits again. So if you've got 3 to 4 students, the recommended minimum time is 15, the maximum time is 20, and so on for candidates that are in groups of 5 or 6. Teachers will be required to stop marking after the maximum performance time for the group has passed. So, preparation, performance, and portfolio. Preparation is key, and connecting process to portfolio is vital. The aim is to devise an original piece for performance. Connections to the chosen text, and specifically the one key extract, should be evidenced in relation to the text as a whole and the chosen practitioner. But that aim to devise an original piece of performance is still the main aim of this component. So, as I said at the beginning, this presentation is called Top Tips Devising at a Distance. So we're going to have a look at some of the strategies that you might want to consider moving forward under the social distancing requirements. This first section, I've looked at performance texts, and I've put down here a series of examples that I think might work. But please bear in mind, these are not personal preferences of mine. They are not personal preferences of the senior team or the wider examining body. They are suggestions. I'm sure that you already have texts that you're familiar with, texts that you know that work, new texts that you want to explore, texts that your students will respond brilliantly to. So these are just examples. Remember, the stimulus text is a springboard, a starting point for the devised work. It is not a reworking of the text. The final product, as I said in the previous slide, is still to create an original piece of drama. Consider a text that embraces some of the themes and ideas pertinent to social distancing. For example, the first 3 texts that I've listed involve characters that are in broken marriages, marriages that are in trouble, that have distance between them, whether that's emotional, psychological, spiritual, physical. The Landlord and Landlady from 2 by Jim Cartwright. That final extract is 10 minutes in length and is hugely emotional and explores the distance in their relationship and how they come together at the end. Torvald and Nora from A Doll's House. John and Elizabeth Proctor from The Crucible. So these are all examples of relationships that have distance in them, which might be an interesting starting point given the circumstances we are in. How to Disappear Completely and Never Be Found has been a very popular text since the start of this new specification, and it explores the themes of death, loss, grief, loneliness and isolation. Similarly, The Trial, a favorite of many teachers across our cohort. The Trial looks at the figure of Joseph K., this Kafkaesque character who has been abandoned and charged by this higher force and doesn't know quite what's going on. Lemons, Lemons, Lemons is a text by Sam Steiner that explores what happens when a government put restrictions on the number of words that can be spoken each day. The Long Road by Sheila Stevenson. The opening extract begins with a mother's response to the death of her son and how she felt when the police turned up on her doorstep. And I thought that would be a really interesting text that looks at bad news, serious subject matter, loneliness, isolation, grief, death, all particularly pertinent themes and ideas relevant to the situation we have been in for the last few months. BU21 is another contemporary text by Stuart Slade that explores a hypothetical terrorist activity and uses lots of monologues to document different personal experiences. So there are some examples of performance texts that I think might work well as springboards. However, I'm sure you've got lots that you've tried before or new and exciting texts that you want to work with this year. But if you are struggling for some suggestions and thinking about how you can make the text pertinent to social distancing, here are some examples. Theatrical devices and techniques. How are we going to actually perform? How are our students going to perform devised pieces under social distancing? Monologues is the most obvious technique that might be used, and I'm imagining this year in particular we might really be sort of developing and perfecting creative writing skills. We might be looking at some very exciting new and original work. Monologues could be presented by one person. Maybe there's one monologue that's written by somebody in the group that's divided amongst the other members of the group, or maybe there's a series of monologues that interconnect fragmented text, overlapping language, connecting phrases. Use of levels and inventive use of space and proxemics, where you put your actors, where you put your audience, how you divide the space, what kind of space you're in. Even something like chair duets could work under social distancing. Thinking about the work of Frantic Assembly and how effective chair duets can be visually, what would happen if those chair duets were 2 meters apart? That might be something you want to explore with your students. Promenade spacing, museum style approaches, an Artodian immersion, the audience being immersed, maybe single occupancy experiences. Mask work for both actors and audience. Masks have become so familiar to us in society. I'm not just talking about theatrical masks, maybe medical masks. That might be something that you can explore. Movement motif work, solo choreography, unison movement, split stage devices, site-specific theatre, but not the broom cupboard. Let's not have audiences in small spaces. Direct address, use of asides, all these Brechtian non-naturalistic techniques that we're all very familiar with, multi-role, gestic props and costumes, showing the mechanics of theatre on stage, placards, narration, or possibly using mixed media devices, using voiceovers, projection work, video work to support live performance work. I know that my own use of technology has developed since lockdown. I'm sure our students are much more savvy and media savvy that they might be able to incorporate some of these media skills in performance. Some teaching ideas for devising. You'll notice I've put a little plug here for the Paper Birds, who I noticed are offering CPD, online CPD to centres with a package called Distance Devising. And some of the ideas that the senior team and I have considered are working outside when possible. Hopefully the weather's going to be on our side. Thinking about individual responses to the extract. Maybe setting a solo performance task for your group after they've been given that initial stimulus, the performance text, the extract. Once they've read the extract and maybe brainstormed a few ideas and thought about themes and ideas and what kind of piece they might want to create, it's often quite useful to send them away and ask them to come back with a solo response. It really helps them answer that first question, which is, what was your initial response to the extract? Once you look at those solo performances, maybe there are ideas that can be developed. What happens when you put these solo performances next to each other? What happens when they overlap? What happens when they collide? Chorus work. Chorus work is obviously going to be very difficult physically. That sense of touch is going to have to be removed under social distancing. But there is a really effective exercise known as the diamond exercise, which is something that I've seen in practice from a theatre company called the Actors of Dionysus, AOD, who are a Brighton-based theatre company. And what they do for chorus work, very simply, is they have 4 actors placed in the shape of a diamond, one at the front, one at the back, 2 at the side. And the person at the front leads the choral work. And then the 3 others mirror so that it creates a shoal unison type of movement. And then as that diamond turns to the right or to the left, that person at the front then becomes the leader. It then turns again, that person becomes the leader. Turns again, that person becomes the leader. And it can be a really simple and effective visual way of working as a chorus without having to actually touch each other in a physical way. Movement motif. This is a phrase that I think is used by lots of different theatre companies, and it's a movement, a series of movement ideas or images that resurrect throughout the performance. Creating solo images from artwork, photographs, newspapers, using keywords, all the things that we do already, but reminding ourselves that these are techniques that will work under social distancing. Verbatim speech from research. Remember, not all words have to be made up. There are so many points of research and evidence for language, transcripts, vlogs, video diaries, online research, interviews, stories. All of these words can be used to create the text of a devised performance. And I put this one down last because I thought it was particularly pertinent to social distancing. Lecoq's cane exercise, where 2 actors are exploring status and shifts in power, but using a stick between them to keep distance, to see who has the balance of power at different times. There's also a really simple way of exploring that first key extract by restructuring some of the lines from the text. What happens when the lines from the text are reordered? That might be an interesting starting point that you can do, particularly if you're putting the key extract up on a whiteboard or projecting it onto a surface where everyone can read it at the same time. This next slide I have borrowed from Open Drama UK. You'll see their website details down below, #distance drama. These are some teaching tips. A lot of it feels like common sense, but it's worth reminding ourselves of some of the basic things that we can do as practitioners in the classroom to keep our students safe when working in a practical subject. Have a seating plan or a group plan projected on the whiteboard or on the floor, socially distanced. Work in the same groups and the same working space for each session, creating little practical bubbles. Do not share resources such as theatrical masks, puppets, or props. Keep doors and windows open if possible. Allow students to enter one at a time, direct them to their spaces. Consider keeping a contact register for your own records. Technical equipment should be operated by the teacher or by the student for exam work. Antibacterial wipes should be used for cleaning all equipment. Regular hand washing. Mobile phones could be used for playing music or research, but consider your school policy when you're using phones in classrooms. Keep costumes simple. Could your students supply their own costumes? Could they take it home and wash it after each session? Clean down chairs, blocks, levels, use wipes to clean surfaces after each session. So there's just some reminders of some common sense approaches to teaching a practical subject. This is a frequently asked question that has come through the Ask the Expert forum and through Paul Webster's team. Can my students perform without an audience? And the simple answer is yes. Your audience could be just the teacher, just the person recording, another group watching, or an audience of socially distanced family and friends. It's up to you how this works in your space and how it protects all of those people involved. If you've got a large space where you can invite an audience and keep them socially distanced, please do so. The more people that can see the work, the better. But if it does mean that you're limited to just 1 or 2 people for this series, that will be understood. Choose your practitioner with your group carefully. The influence and the methodology of the chosen practitioner or the company remains paramount to this first component. It's therefore really important to consider how the methodology of that practitioner might support the concept of social distancing in a live performance context. So for an example, if you wanted, or if your students wanted to explore the work of Deviate, it's possible, but it's already going to throw up lots of extra challenges working in a social distance context. So here are 3 different practitioners, companies that I've listed here that I think might work well, but they are not preferences. They are not preferences from the exam board. They are just suggestions. I'm sure you've got practitioners that you love to explore and that your students have already, through their research, I'm sure, sparked an interest in. So see what you can do with those suggestions. The Paper Birds are a female theatre company. They use verbatim, movement motif, minimalist sets, and symbolic staging. Lots of their ideas and the key ingredients of their methodology could be used in a social distancing context. Complicite, using mixed media, storytelling, playing around with ancient texts, that sense of play, inventive use of props, using microphones, voiceovers, projections. And Splendid Theatre Company, a popular Brechtian style theatre company that use multi-role, instruments, placards, narration, often exploring a political viewpoint, and audience interaction. So these are companies that could work, but they are just 3 examples. There are tons and tons and tons of practitioners and valid theatre companies out there that will be able to work equally as well. So a quick reminder of the portfolio. The portfolio should document and reflect on the exploratory process, the skills and techniques that have been developed in response to the text, the influence of the chosen practitioner. There are 6 statements outlined in the specification, and they must be addressed in the portfolio. The statements are headings that could be really useful and provide a really useful structure for candidates when they are writing their portfolio or recording. Remember, there are lots of different ways that this portfolio can be assessed. There are 3 assessment objectives for the portfolio, 2 covering AO1, 1 covering AO4, reflecting the weighting of marks available. I've put this in yellow because it was another frequently asked question from a centre. My students have already started working on their devised work before lockdown. As a result, their plans may now change when they come back to centres. Those changes can and should be documented in their portfolio because it's part of the process, refining, editing, improving. However, the word count should not be compromised. Being concise continues to be an important skill in their deconstruction and evaluation of their devising experience. So please make sure that the word count is adhered to. A final thought, just coming up to 23 minutes of this presentation. In a time of crisis, we look to the arts. It's worth remembering that this generation of theatre makers are a COVID cohort, and therefore their own experiences of lockdown and isolation will play an inevitable part in their devising and theatre making process. This should be celebrated and referred to in their portfolios if appropriate. If there are any further questions regarding this presentation or how you might work in a social distance context with your students in a practical subject, please email Paul Webster on teachingperformingarts@pearson.com. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for signing in. I'm going to stop sharing now and wish you and your students all the very best for this very exciting Component 1 project.